What is terrorism and who defines it?
Right, that's a brilliant question.
Who is a terrorist and according to who?
When you read the recommendations of the Financial Action Task Force, they define a terrorist as somebody that goes around terrorizing people, utilizing violence in order for political gains. And that definition will be tried and tested by the United Nations Security Council. That's what it says.
It's a person who does what? Uses violence to terrorize other people for political gain.
Yes.
We know who's the biggest country that does that.
100%.
Please continue.
But now the Financial Action Task Force tried to be clever. They use the definition that a designated person is a terrorist is that person that has been designated as a terrorist by the UN Security Council. But they use that selectively throughout the document. So that in certain areas, as we said, that American influence by the US Treasury in 1990, in 2001, after 9/11, deliberately wanted to ensure that America's definition of a terrorist is what is also combined with what it is that the UN defines. So now the Americans are saying, when we say somebody is a terrorist, we expect the G7 nations to back us up and the Financial Action Task Force to back us up. And those recommendations that are forcing third-party countries to implement the recommendations of the Financial Action Task Force to also identify what America identifies as a terrorist, and for you to block them. Now they're saying, once we've identified somebody as a terrorist, we want you to close their account, whether there is evidence or not,
as long as we say
perpetuated terrorism.
So we watch a lot of Hollywood movies, and I think we agree that Hollywood has become one of the most powerful propaganda machines for America and maybe the CIA. When we think terrorists today, we think of an Arab man who is Muslim. And I'm just trying to think for a normal person that's going to be listening to this conversation. Can a white man be a terrorist? Can a white woman be a terrorist? Because clearly, if someone's going to say that's a terrorist, like it can't be, doesn't look. And that becomes profiling. And that, of course, because of the movies, it's been playing in our heads that a terrorist can only look this way. It's like a criminal. When someone says, oh, but he doesn't look like a criminal. You're like, oh, he's not black. He's not wearing a hoodie. He doesn't speak broken English. It's a clean, white woman, polished. Can't be her. That's very dangerous. And when we start saying white male America gets to define what is a terrorist, because it will never be a white man.
And remember, this definition has been given by a nation where white men eliminated 50 million American Indians to then create a white world where they wiped out the natives of that land. And it's a terrorist country that terrorized American Indians and continues to terrorize American Indians, giving us a definition of what it is that is a terrorist. And that is intentional. Like we are showing you right now that the Financial Action Task Force is now being manipulated from having a total definition of a terrorist being given by the United Nations to now having a terrorist being defined by the Americans, not only in their policies, but also in their subliminal influence of our judges, our lawyers, and everybody who's going to be part and parcel of this process between now in November and January next year of making laws for South Africa that's going to define the new regulations that South Africa has to make in order to conform to the Financial Action Task Force recommendations. And the Financial Action Task Force is saying another problem is South Africa has not been identifying violent crime in South Africa adequately as terrorism. And they believe that some of the drug crime that you've got in Western Cape, some of the taxi violence that you've got in this country, some of the violent crimes that you've got in this country should be adequately defined as terrorism and should be designated as terrorism. And the people that are perpetrating these crimes should be designated as terrorists and their funds should be blocked accordingly. And therefore, they should have their properties confiscated. Now, that again confuses me because the definition of a terrorist should be done at the UN. But the Financial Action Task Force is asking South Africa and the South African Parliament, the South African government to make legislation that criminalizes any violent crime and categorizes it as terrorism, and those funds should be treated as money laundering and terrorism, and also potentially the financing of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. Now,